Roy Keane has never questioned his Irishness. For his entire career, he's been the voice of Irish sporting integrity, the Corkman who represented Ireland with pride, who fought for Irish standards, who demanded that anyone wearing the green jersey understood what it meant, until April 2024, when he sat across from Conor McGregor on RTE's Late Late Show for a second time and made the fatal mistake of questioning whether Conor was really Irish, given that he lived abroad and avoided paying Irish taxes. What Conor said in response, calmly and devastatingly, made Roy Keane sit in complete silence for 41 seconds before attempting a defense that everyone watching knew was desperate. Because Conor had just asked the question nobody had dared ask Roy Keane in 30 years. Roy, where did you live during your playing career? Where did you pay your taxes? Who did you really represent? 6 months after their first explosive encounter on the Late Late Show, Irish media was still talking about it. The confrontation over Saipan, over representation, over what it meant to be Irish had become a cultural moment. But it had left one question unanswered. What does Irish loyalty actually mean in the modern world? That question came to a head in March 2024, when the Irish Times published an investigation into wealthy Irish athletes living abroad to avoid tax. Conor McGregor was the headline example: officially resident in Dubai, training camps in Portugal, minimal time in Ireland, despite claiming to represent the country globally. The backlash was immediate. Social media erupted, politicians condemned tax avoidance, and Roy Keane, during his regular Sky Sports punditry slot, added fuel. If these lads love Ireland so much, why don't they live there? Why don't they contribute there? You can't wrap yourself in the tricolor for marketing while living in Dubai for tax purposes. That's not patriotism, that's hypocrisy. The comments went viral in Ireland, and Conor McGregor, for the first time in his career, requested a second appearance on the Late Late Show. Not to promote a fight, not to sell whiskey, to address Roy Keane directly. Patrick Keelty, now permanent host after Ryan Tubridy's departure, knew exactly what this was, round 2, and this time it was going to be even more personal. The RTE studio felt different this time. The first encounter had been tense but ultimately respectful, ending with mutual acknowledgement. This one felt dangerous from the moment both men walked in. Roy Keane arrived first, wearing his usual dark suit, white shirt, no tie. He sat with the posture of a man who knew he was right, who'd spent 3 decades being the moral compass of Irish sport. Conor arrived minutes later, 3-piece navy suit, white shirt, Irish flag pin on his lapel, a deliberate choice that everyone noticed. The visual statement was clear: I'm Irish, prove I'm not. Patrick Keelty opened carefully. Gentlemen, 6 months ago you had a conversation that Ireland is still talking about. Tonight you're back to discuss something equally uncomfortable: what it means to be Irish in a globalized world, and whether living abroad compromises that identity. Keane didn't wait for a question. Let me be clear, he said, his Cork accent thick. I'm not questioning Conor's heritage. He's Dublin born. But there's a difference between being Irish and representing Ireland. And when you choose to live abroad specifically to avoid paying Irish taxes while simultaneously using your Irishness to market yourself, that's not representation, that's exploitation. The studio went quiet. Conor smiled slightly, the smile of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. Roy, he said calmly, before we discuss your choices, let's discuss yours. Where did you live from 1993 to 2006? Keane's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. Manchester. I played for Manchester United. Exactly, Conor said, leaning forward. For 13 years, the most important years of your career. You lived in England, you paid your taxes to the British government, you built your wealth in Britain. Every pound you earned went into the UK economy, not Ireland's. So, before you lecture me about loyalty, let's talk about yours. The studio had gone from quiet to frozen. This wasn't the expected conversation. This was a trap, and Keane was in it. "That was different," Keane said, his voice harder now. "I was playing for the biggest club in the world. That's where my career took me." "Right," Conor agreed. "Your career took you to England. My career takes me to Dubai, to Portugal, to America. We both went where we needed to go to succeed. The difference is, I don't pretend I'm doing it for Ireland. You did." Keane's jaw clenched. "I represented Ireland every time I wore the jersey." "How many caps did you have, Roy?" Conor asked, the question hanging like a blade. 67, Keane said. 67 caps, Conor repeated, over 14 years. That's less than 5 games a year representing Ireland. The rest of the time, every week, every match, you wore a Manchester United shirt. You represented England's most famous club in England's league for England's fans, paying England's taxes. 13 years, Roy. 13 years where your loyalty was to Manchester United, not to Ireland. So when you say, "I'm not really Irish because I live in Dubai," I say you weren't really Irish when you lived in Manchester. The only difference is nobody questioned you because you were too intimidating. Well, I'm not intimidated. The attack was surgical. Everything Keane had built his criticism on, that living abroad meant you weren't truly Irish, applied equally to him, and everyone in that studio knew it. Patrick Keelty looked like he wanted to intervene but couldn't find the words. This was beyond his control now. "I played for United because that's where I could be the best," Keane said, his voice defensive now. "And I live in Dubai because that's where I can keep the most of what I earn," Conor shot back. "We both made practical choices, Roy. You chose career, I chose wealth protection. Neither of us is wrong, but you're a hypocrite if you judge me for doing what you did." Keane tried to pivot. "At least when I was at United, I was competing. I was giving everything to the sport. You're half retired, doing celebrity nonsense, living the easy life while pretending you're some warrior." Conor's expression hardened. "Roy, let's talk about your career after United. You retired at 33, tried management at Sunderland, sacked after less than 2 years, tried Ipswich, sacked after 4 months, tried Aston Villa as assistant, walked away when it got hard. Then what? 15 years as a pundit, sitting in a studio talking about other people doing what you can't do anymore. That's your post-career, Roy. Talking, the thing you accuse me of doing too much." Keane's face reddened. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Conor pressed. "You call me a celebrity. You call what I do nonsense. But I built businesses worth hundreds of millions. I created jobs. I invested in Irish companies. I put Ireland on the global map in a way football never did. Because when people think Roy Keane, they think Manchester United. When they think Conor McGregor, they think Ireland. I made Ireland relevant in combat sports, in fashion, in whiskey, in global culture. What did you do for Ireland, Roy? You played 67 games and spent the rest of your career in England making England richer." The silence was devastating. Keane sat rigid, his fists clenched. "And let's address the tax question directly," Conor said. "You say I avoid Irish taxes. Fine, but you avoided them too. For 13 years, every pound you earned went to Britain. You built British schools, British hospitals, British infrastructure with your tax money, not Irish. How much tax did you pay to Ireland during your playing career, Roy? Almost nothing, because you didn't live there. So don't act morally superior when you did exactly what I'm doing. The only difference is the country we chose." Keane tried to pivot, but Conor wasn't done. "And here's the part that really bothers me, Roy. You had a choice. You could have played for Cork City. You could have stayed in Ireland, developed Irish football, paid Irish taxes, built the League of Ireland into something respectable. But you didn't. You left. You went to England the first chance you got because you knew Ireland couldn't offer what you needed. And I don't blame you for that. I'd have done the same. But you can't judge me for making the same calculation you did. You can't demand loyalty you never gave."
There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Then Keane spoke, his voice quieter but still firm. "Everything I did was to be the best, to compete at the highest level. That required going to England. Exactly, Conor said, and his tone shifted slightly, less aggressive, more reasoned. And everything I do is to be the best and to build security for my family. That requires tax efficiency. We're the same, Roy. We both prioritised career and wealth over pure Irish loyalty, and that's okay. That's smart. But you can't admit that because your entire brand is built on being the ultimate Irish patriot, the man who demanded standards, the man who walked out at Saipan because the facilities weren't good enough. But that wasn't about Ireland, Roy. That was about you. Keane's eyes flashed. Don't bring Saipan into this. It's already in this, Conor said firmly, because Saipan proves my point. You were Ireland's captain. You were supposed to lead them to the World Cup, and when things weren't perfect, when the preparation wasn't up to your standards, you didn't fight through it. You didn't sacrifice your principles for the team. You left. You abandoned them. And you justified it by saying you were protecting Irish standards, but really, Roy, you were protecting Roy Keane's standards. You put yourself above the collective, just like I do, just like every successful person does. The difference is, I admit it, you hide behind patriotism. The studio was absolutely silent. Patrick Keelty looked pale. This had gone from a debate about taxes to an existential interrogation of Roy Keane's entire identity. I've thought about Saipan every day for 22 years, Keane said quietly. I know I let people down. I know I put my ego ahead of the team, but I believed I was right. And you probably were right, Conor said, his voice softening. The facilities were shit. The preparation was inadequate. You saw a standard that wasn't being met and you refused to compromise. I respect that, Roy. I do. But don't pretend it was about Ireland. It was about you refusing to accept less than the best, which is exactly what I do. When I choose to live in Dubai, I'm refusing to accept a 50% tax rate when I can legally pay less. When you chose to stay in Manchester after your playing career, you were refusing to come back to Ireland where the opportunities were smaller. We're both selfish, Roy. Successful people are, but I don't dress it up as patriotism. Keane sat back in his chair, and for the first time in the interview, he looked less like the Cork enforcer and more like a man processing something uncomfortable. You're saying I'm a hypocrite, he said flatly. I'm saying we're both pragmatists who chose career and wealth over pure national loyalty, and that's fine, Conor corrected, but you judge me for it while pretending you didn't do it. That's the hypocrisy, Roy, not the choice itself. There was a long pause. Then Keane did something unexpected. He nodded. Fair point, he said quietly. I did choose United over staying in Ireland. I did build my wealth in Britain. And I did justify it by saying I was competing at the highest level, which made it noble somehow. But you're right that if I'm honest, it was about what was best for me and my family, not about what was best for Ireland. The admission stunned the studio. Patrick Keelty looked like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. This was Roy Keane admitting vulnerability, admitting calculation, admitting selfishness. And maybe that's the real conversation, Keane said thoughtfully now. Maybe the problem isn't you or me making smart decisions for our careers and families. Maybe the problem is Ireland expecting us to sacrifice those things for some abstract idea of loyalty when the country itself can't offer what we need to succeed. Conor leaned back, the aggression gone from his posture. That's exactly it, Roy. Ireland is a small country. The Irish League can't compete with the Premier League. The Irish tax system can't compete with Dubai or Portugal. That's not our fault, that's reality. And if Ireland wants to keep its successful people, it needs to create conditions where staying makes sense. Otherwise, we'll keep leaving, just like Irish people have been leaving for 200 years. The famine ships, Keane said quietly. What? Conor asked. The famine ships, Keane repeated. My great-grandfather left Cork in 1920 for work in England. He didn't want to leave, he had to. Emigration isn't new for Ireland, it's our history. Maybe we're just the latest generation doing what Irish people have always done, going where we need to go to survive and succeed.
The conversation had shifted completely. What started as a confrontation about tax and loyalty had become something deeper.
a discussion about Irish identity, about emigration, about the impossible expectations placed on successful Irish people. "I think I've been angry at you," Keane said, "because you do publicly what I did privately. You talk about your wealth, your choices, your success. I hid all that behind being a footballer. But we made the same calculations. You're just honest about it." "And I think I've been defensive about you," Conor said, "because you represent a version of Irishness I can never live up to. The humble warrior, the team player, the man who suffers in silence. That's never been me. I had to be loud to get noticed. I had to sell myself because nobody was going to do it for me. And when you criticized that, it felt like you were saying there's only one way to be properly Irish, your way, the old way." Keane nodded slowly. "Maybe that's been unfair. Maybe there's room for both, the quiet professional and the loud promoter, the collective and the individual, the man who stays and the man who leaves. Maybe they're all Irish." "They have to be," Conor said, "because we can't all stay. The country's too small, the opportunities are too limited. Some of us have to leave to succeed. That doesn't make us less Irish, it makes us practical Irish." The audience, which had been silent for nearly 20 minutes, started applauding. Not the explosive applause of the first confrontation, but something more thoughtful, more considered. Patrick Keelty finally found his voice. "I think you've both just articulated something that Ireland struggles with. How to be Irish in a global economy where success often requires leaving. And how to not judge those who leave," Keane added, "because we've all left in some way." The interview ended shortly after, but the impact was immediate and profound. Within hours, #IrishLoyalty was trending across Ireland and the UK. Clips of Keane's admission, "I chose United over staying in Ireland," were shared millions of times. Irish newspapers ran with headlines like "Keane and McGregor redefine Irish patriotism" and "The conversation Ireland needed to have." But more significant was the conversation it started in Irish homes, workplaces and pubs, about emigration, about success, about what Ireland expects from its high achievers and whether those expectations are fair. About the fact that Ireland's most successful people, from Bono to Colin Farrell to Saoirse Ronan to Keane to McGregor, all left to achieve that success. The Irish government announced within a week that they'd commission a study on tax reform to make Ireland more competitive for high earners. Opposition TDs criticised McGregor by name, but also admitted that Ireland's 50% top tax rate made it difficult to retain successful people. What Roy Keane and Conor McGregor did that April evening was force Ireland to confront an uncomfortable truth. Irish patriotism has always required leaving. From the famine ships to the building sites of London to the tech workers of Silicon Valley, Irish success has always meant emigration. And judging those who leave while celebrating their success when they return is hypocrisy on a national scale. Both men admitted their choices were selfish. Both acknowledged they prioritized career and wealth over pure national loyalty. But both also argued that this was smart, necessary, and ultimately beneficial to Ireland, because their global success raised Ireland's profile in ways staying home never could. The lesson wasn't that leaving makes you less Irish, it's that modern Irishness requires a more complex understanding of loyalty, one that acknowledges economic reality, personal ambition, and the fact that a small island can't contain all its talent. Roy Keane built his career in England and paid British taxes for 13 years. Conor McGregor built his global brand while officially resident in Dubai. Neither is wrong, both are Irish. And that tension between staying and leaving, between loyalty and pragmatism, between old expectations and modern reality, is the story of Ireland itself.